It's a bright and beautiful day for football in St. Louis's Busch Stadium as the hometown Cardinals host the Washington Redskins. Both teams are in the National Conference's New Eastern Division, and it's especially fitting that this old rivalry has been preserved. The two teams have battled on such close terms down through the years that going into today's game, the series is tied at 22 games apiece. Something will have to give today. The Washington Redskins are coming off their finest preseason in 20 years. They won 5 straight games. The death of Vince Lombardi has given them renewed dedication and unity. This is now combined with the team's strengths, their fine air attack led by Sonny Jurgensen, Charlie Taylor, and Jerry Smith, and a matured defensive backfield. The big hope for improvement is in a revamped defensive line. Today, this line must put pressure on Cardinal quarterback Jim Hart if Washington is to win. After 5 seasons, Jim Hart finally has been handed the job as regular quarterback. The trade of the veteran Charlie Johnson to Houston was a vote of confidence, and last week Hart responded by passing for nearly 300 yards in the loss to the Rams. Today's game should answer some important questions for both teams. I'm Jack Whitaker, and this is the NFL Game of the Week. The St. Louis Cardinals versus the Washington Redskins. Washington received the opening kickoff and failed to gain a first down when cornerback Miller Farr stopped Walter Roberts after a gain of only 5 yards on a Jurgensen possession pass. But the Redskins got the first break of the game when Mike Bragg was hit while punting. Instead of giving up the ball, Washington had a first down on their own 43 because of the roughing the kicker penalty. They lost no time in taking advantage of their opportunity. Larry Brown, using his blockers well, went 22 yards through the right side of the Cardinal defense, and the Skins were on the enemy 17. He was forced out by Jerry Stovall. Jurgensen, under heavy pressure then, went for his favorite receiver, Charlie Taylor, in the end zone, but the official ruled the flanker was out of bounds when he made the catch. Another look at that play reveals Taylor indeed was out of bounds. He caught the ball inside the back line, but failed to put both feet in the end zone. Kurt Knight kicked a field goal from the 17, but incredibly, St. Louis was again called for roughing the kicker on the play, the second time in one series. Again, Washington accepted the gift graciously. Larry Brown plowed in from the 5-yard line, and instead of leading 3-0, Washington was out ahead of St. Louis 7-0. They had controlled the ball for a full 5.5 minutes on this first series of the game. The Cardinals received the kickoff and began a time-consuming drive of their own, almost exclusively on the ground. Coach Charlie Winter's strategy was nothing fancy. He had his quarterback Jim Hart hand the ball to number 36, MacArthur Lane. The 220-pound back from Utah State simply couldn't be handled by the Washington defense. He tore through the Redskin line time after time. He carried 6 times, including runs of 8, 16, and 9 yards, as the Cardinals went from their own 26 to the Washington 30. There, for the first time, Lane was stopped short by Washington's defense. Linebacker Harold McClinton, number 53, refused to be blocked and made the play on Lane. Then Chris Hanberger forced Lane to leap in the air, and St. Louis was seemingly stopped. The Cardinals called for a measurement, but they were short of the first down. The Washington line has undergone sweeping defensive changes, with only end Leo Carroll left from last season. Veterans Floyd Peters and Bruce Anderson obtained in trades, and the Redskins' top draft pick, Bill Brundage, formed the rest of this revamped front four. With it 4th and 1, Hart kept on a quarterback sneak and made the necessary yardage. St. Louis looked like a cinch to score. Then, in close range to the goal line, Hart abandoned his running game and went to the air. On a perfectly executed screen pass, Lane followed his blockers 30 yards for an apparent touchdown. But illegal procedure was called against St. Louis, and the ball was brought back to the 34. Dave Williams dropped a pass that meant a certain first down. Then, with plenty of time to throw, Hart overthrew Gilliam, and the ball was intercepted by Brig Owens to end the threat. The Cardinals had controlled the football for almost 9 minutes, yet had nothing to show for it. On the last play of the first quarter, Jurgensen passed to Charlie Taylor for 26 yards. The completion lifted his career total to over 2,000 passes. Only Johnny Unitas and Y.A. Tittle have more. First play of the second period, and Larry Brown, fast becoming one of the fine runners, carried through the middle for 11 yards and another Redskin first down. The other member of the backfield, Charlie Haraway, number 31, carried 9 yards over the right side, and it was 3rd and 1. Here, Jurgensen crossed up the St. Louis defense by disdaining the run in an obvious situation. His pass to Taylor was there, but the all-pro receiver couldn't hang on. Kurt Knight was called on from the 36, and he delivered. Washington led 10-0. In the second quarter, St. Louis took up where it left off by moving the ball easily. Gilliam was wide open to take an 18-yard pass. Pat Fisher, the man he beat, love-patted him out of bounds. Then 230-pound Sid Edwards barreled 9 yards off tackle. On 2nd and 1, Hart went to Smith and barely missed connections with the big tight end. This brought up another 3rd and 1 situation, and again Hart found the same solution. He took it on a sneak. However, he tried the tactic once too often. He fumbled, and linebacker Harold McClinton recovered for Washington. St. Louis had moved the ball well again, but still hadn't put that first point on the board. But for the first time in the game, St. Louis's defense held the Redskins. Jurgensen tried to go to Taylor on the bomb, and number 22, Roger Worley, stuck right with his man to break up the pass. Washington had to punt. This time, St. Louis was not to be denied. Hart found Sid Edwards alone on a circle pass, and it was good for 18 yards and a first down. Note Edwards' forward thrust. Then Hart and Gilliam combined on a precise sideliner for 20 yards. The momentum was interrupted when McClinton and Marlon McKeever threw Lane for a loss of 2 yards. But Hart went to the screen that worked well before, and Edwards went 11 yards with it. On 3rd and 1 situation at the Washington 31, Lane picked up 8 more over center and still another Cardinal first down. The huge running back was enjoying the finest day of a 3-year career. Then from the 23, Hart couldn't find a receiver and kept around right end. He was met hard by a McClinton forearm, and the quarterback went down for the count. Hart was forced out of the game with a neck injury, and St. Louis was awarded an additional 10 yards on the penalty. Pete Beathard replaced Hart. Beathard was obtained in the big trade with Houston, in which he and Miller Farr came to the Cards in exchange for Charlie Johnson and Bob Atkins. Beathard finished what Hart began by handing to Lane, who bulled his way 9 yards over the left side for the touchdown. Washington 10, St. Louis 7. It's a bit poignant that just as Hart had established himself as the starting quarterback and had led his team toward a certain score, he had to be removed. He watched from the bench as Beathard carried out a Cardinal strategy that could be summed up in 2 words: MacArthur Lane. Lane went 8 yards over the middle, then 8 more through the left side in a display of brutal power running. Then he took a Beathard pitch out 6 yards to the Washington 33. With the Redskins now overconscious of the run, Beathard hit Gilliam on a slant for 13 yards and another Cardinal first down. First and 10 at the 20, and Beathard pitched out to Smith on an end around for another pickup of 13 yards. St. Louis seemed to be moving at will. Another look shows the excellent faking of Beathard and the speed of Smith. Few tight ends can turn a corner as quickly as the 235-pound Smith, one of the best in the game at his position. With the ball on the 6-yard line and the Redskins reeling, Beathard dropped back and tossed to Johnny Rowland on the left flat for a second straight touchdown and the go-ahead points. A repeat of this play shows Beathard had excellent protection. Cardinal quarterbacks weren't dropped once while attempting to pass today, and Beathard's pass was properly thrown to Rowland, who was all alone. St. Louis had made it look easy in coming from behind 13-10. With the Cardinals nursing a 3-point lead and Jim Hart nursing a sore neck, the third quarter would demonstrate that defense and ball control are more than an ample substitute for an injured quarterback. MacArthur Lane handled the ball control aspect all by himself. Of the 7 Cardinal running plays in the third quarter, Lane ran all of them, going over, around, and through the Redskins' defense. Beathard's plan was basic. If a play worked, he stuck with it. When a pass to Jackie Smith was successful, he repeated it on the next play, but just overthrew Smith's outstretched hands. At the Redskins' 24, however, Beathard's plan was foiled, as his deep pass was underthrown, and cornerback Mike Bass became a receiver. Bass's interception gave Washington a much-needed break, but ironically, it was just the beginning of a chain of events that would cost the Redskins the game. The first link in the chain, Sonny Jurgensen throws the ball smack into the hands of cornerback Miller Farr. 20-10, St. Louis. Second link. Sonny Jurgensen throws the ball smack into the hands of lineman Ralph Kruger. No damage. Third link. Sonny Jurgensen throws the ball smack into the hands of safety Jerry Stovall. Stovall goes 27 yards to the Redskins 2. On a replay of the interception, we can see that Sonny was aiming for Walt Roberts on a quick post, but Stovall was positioned perfectly to make his move and almost went all the way with the help of number 67, Larry Stallings. Jurgensen himself saved a score by shaking hands with Stovall at the 5. It took MacArthur Lane 3 plays to find the end zone. On second down, he barely missed. On third, he would make it. The Cardinals had scored twice within 2 minutes and took a 27-10 lead. Coach Bill Austin then took a page from the St. Louis strategy. On the next series, the Redskins sent Larry Brown loose on an odyssey through the Cardinal defense. Of course, like all runners, Brown is much a product of his offensive line. Watch the picture trap blocking by the center and left guard that opened the last play for Brown. Number 43 runs every type of play with equal success. He is quick through a hole. He can cut back inside on a wide play, thus rendering a containment policy ineffective against him. And he knows how to use his blocking on the sweep. Brown's running carried Washington to the Cardinals' 30 as the quarter ended. From here, Jurgensen demonstrated the art of finding the secondary receiver when the first is covered. First down on the 18. Miller Farr saved a touchdown on 2nd and 1 from the 9 with a textbook play by a cornerback. But Larry Brown got the first, and Washington looked like they would have a sure 3, if not 7. The Skins, however, came up empty. On perhaps the biggest play of the game, Haraway fumbled, and Roger Worley recovered for St. Louis in the end zone. Another bad break had cost the Redskins dearly. Winning a pro football game is said to be more a matter of breaks than having a preponderance of talent, and the Cardinals were certainly receiving their fair share. Haraway's fumble nearly became contagious on the first play after the Cards took possession. It is also said, however, that upon close inspection, breaks will tend to even out. On the very next play, John Gilliam's 85-yard catch and run will be called back. Gilliam himself was detected interfering with the defender, and a beautiful play goes into the books as just another penalty. So Beathard went right back to the bomb. Behind perfect protection, he fired a long one for Dave Williams. But Mike Bass was right there to break it up, and Washington took over with 10 minutes left in the game. Jurgensen went into high gear now, showing the skills that have made him one of the all-time greats. The rifle was now firing his patented shots to all areas of the field, to all 3 of his receivers. After a pass to Smith, he hit Walt the Flea Roberts for another first down. Then, aided by a block by Larry Brown, he found Charlie Taylor on his knees at the 9. Then came another of those breaks, this time for the Redskins. Brown's fumble and Cardinal recovery was nullified due to a penalty. So Charlie Haraway skirted left end and went in for the score. On a repeat of the play, watch number 62, guard Ray Schenke, throw a crushing block on the cornerback to let Haraway go in untouched. With 7 minutes left and down by 10, the Redskins figured to have at least a chance for victory. But as the Cardinals began their next series, it slowly became apparent that the Skins' chances were no more than a pipe dream. Pete Beathard and MacArthur Lane saw to that. Lane personally ran down 6 minutes on the clock and wound up with 146 yards rushing. Lane's domination of this game was truly awesome, and his offensive line, Reynolds, Goody, Mulligan, Williams, and McMillan, deserve much of the credit. Washington got the ball back, but by then they had little time and even less success. The Cardinals' 27-17 victory was a product of superior line play, tough defense, and a smart game plan by both Cardinal quarterbacks. For their road to success today was not the well-traveled expressway called the long pass. Rather, the Cardinals chose a path heretofore seldom traveled, but one that should be well worn by the end of the year. A path by the name of MacArthur Lane.